It starts with a love for animals, but these situations can turn chaotic and dangerous. I'm Stephanie Simmons, and this is the backstory of mass animal rescues. Now, we've seen some troubling cases here in San Diego County, including at Villa Chardonnay in Julian, California, where 728 animals were rescued. Joining me now is Chief Jace Huggins with the San Diego Humane Society. Thank you so much, Chief, for being with us. Of course, Villa Chardonnay happened back in May, and it was astronomical, the amount of animals and the amount of agencies that had to respond to a situation like this. Just looking at the chopper video we had from that situation, it was in the media, we used the word appalling. So for people who don't know, can you briefly describe what Villa Chardonnay is and what exactly happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Villa Chardonnay was a sanctuary, a self-proclaimed rescue for animals who had amassed, as you shared, a large number, 728 animals on the property. And we stepped in after doing some initial inspections. We determined that the condition of the animals was just not safe anymore, that they couldn't stay on there. And so we did get a search warrant to go ahead and get on the property. It was 42 acres. It was a massive property. Aside from the concept of a massive rescue, it was just a massive property to search, to seize the animals, and then to start providing the ongoing care for them.
How long had it been open before you served that search warrant?
So Villa Chardonnay had been open for, I don't know when they first opened, but probably at least 15 years in 2 to 3 different cities. They had been up in Hemet. They had been, I believe, in the Temecula area, and then had moved down to San Diego, I believe, in 2019 or 2020, somewhere around there. They moved into the San Diego County area.
Okay, so let's clarify a couple of things and what it takes to actually get that search warrant and the amount of evidence you need. So over time, there had been some complaints of neglect or suspicions of. Neighbors had called, and some in the public said, well, there were whispers here and there. What took so long to actually go in and rescue these animals?
So there's a host of different codes and ordinances that we utilize when we're working animal cases, and most of the time we have to be able to get onto the property and see the condition of the animals. For Villa Chardonnay specifically, because the property was so big, access was very difficult. We have to respect people's Fourth Amendment rights. We can't just walk onto their property whenever we want. We have to be able to get the same type of evidence police have to get for things related to drug, any of those type of charges. We have to have that same type of supporting evidence that we can state to a judge, hey, I believe this is true. This is what I've seen. This is what I've heard. And the residents at Villa Chardonnay and owners at Villa Chardonnay were not very compliant. We also sometimes will utilize things like zoning laws, code laws, but there just were none that had come up previously for the county to really be able to utilize and hold against them to get feet on the property.
Okay, so people had called you, correct?
Yes, so people had called both Department of Animal Services, and we had also received some calls.
Okay, and we're withholding the names because there are no criminal charges
Correct.
at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, and so this investigation is still ongoing.
Correct.
Okay, so let's go through a couple of these numbers here. 446 cats, 175 horses, 30 chickens, 12 goats. The list goes on here. So when you finally got that search warrant, tell us what you saw upon arrival and what other agencies did you bring with you to execute this rescue?
Absolutely. So we had the San Diego Sheriff's Department was there assisting us with clearing the house, making sure that the scene was safe. We had Pasadena Humane Society that joined us. Both their medical and field services team assisted us. LA County Animal Services joined us. Department of Animal Services was there working collaboratively with us. I don't even know off the top of my head, but there was easily 80 people that first day to 2 days working on getting the animals secured, safe, out of there in the case of the livestock and the cats, and then just starting care for the horses, because we actually ended up seizing the horses in place, which is not typical, but in this particular case, that's what ended up being best, both for managing the case and for managing those horses.
Right, and just the horses alone, you need to be able to have that amount of equipment to haul them out of their trailers and such. That is not an easy feat. And
Correct.
those horses are very strong. You don't know if they're scared. You don't know what kind of condition they're in. So when you went in there, you knew the size of the property, but did you have any idea of the massive amount of animals you were going to find?
We knew that we were going to be dealing with a large number. I had gotten access to the cat room the week prior, and I had estimated the cats at 300. I was a little bit off on my estimation. And we had been able to walk a little piece of the property. We were estimating about 100 horses. We weren't really sure about the exact livestock numbers because they were harder to see at the time where we were able to get access. But we definitely did not expect over 700 animals. We were a little bit surprised by the final count.
And I don't think the general public really knows how these things are executed. So for your safety, and you said going in first, you knew these owners were not compliant. So you have the San Diego Police Department go in clear. They're the ones with the weapons, and they make sure your safety first, and then you can go in and do your job. So upon arrival, did you see animals you knew were going to have to be put down because they were in such terrible shape? Were they not being fed? Were they being abused?
So they were, when we say not being fed, were there very skinny animals? Absolutely. It isn't necessarily related to not being fed. When you have that many animals in the same location, there can be a lot of competition feeding. So the healthiest will take all the food, pick on the less healthy ones, push them away, or the weaker ones. So we had like a mixed bag, and that's why, some people who saw you talked about the aerial, like, oh, the horses don't look bad. There were some that looked great. There were some cats that looked great. There were also some cats that were, had to be euthanized immediately because they were so sick, and horses that we had to euthanize shortly after the seizure. So it's a mixed bag of the different animals, and that's related to not being able to keep up consistently for every single animal.
So this was a case where the owners possibly ran out of funds or didn't have the staff in general to be able to take care of all of these animals, or they bit off more than they could chew, essentially.
And continued collecting animals, yeah.
Okay, and so did they think that they were just going to get money somewhere, and eventually did they start off with good intentions?
Oftentimes these things start off with the best of intentions, but I also think that there becomes a system where in order to get more money, especially as a perceived nonprofit or rescue or sanctuary, you have to take in more animals to continue getting the money. And so I think that for this particular case was something that ended up happening where the animals that came in, owners would pay for the animal to be left at that sanctuary. And it created a system where the way to get more money was to bring in more animals, which is a dangerous and slippery slope.
Yeah, a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Okay, we do have to take a quick break, but I do have some more questions on Villa Chardonnay, and also we want to talk about the mental aspect of how animal hoarding becomes an issue. So keep it right here. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We are here with Chief Huggins with the San Diego Humane Society, and we were talking about Villa Chardonnay, mass animal rescues, animal hoarding situations. So you went in at the beginning of May of this year. So now nearly 4 months later, we want a status update, not only on the animals themselves, but also what's happening with the property.
Yeah, absolutely. So of the 728 animals, there were some that were sick, that were ill, that we did have to humanely euthanize, but a majority of the animals were able to get placed, adopted out. We do still have 22 horses, I believe. And there is a website, horses@sdhumane.org, where interested parties can go and say that they're interested in adopting one of the horses, and we'll set up an appointment to go meet and greet. But we're doing really good, and all of these animals are getting placed into better homes and getting the care that they deserve.
That is wonderful news to hear when you have hundreds and hundreds of animals. So did you send some dogs and cats and other animals to other cities so that they could help with the adoption process and fostering?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of them actually went to other states. Some of the cats went to Texas. Almost all of the livestock actually had a prior court injunction mandating that all of the livestock be transferred to the Suwana Ranch, which is overseen by the Humane Farming Association. They were a great help through this entire thing. They actually started some of the initial investigation. Other cats have been transported. Some of the dogs have been transported to some other local San Diego County or Southern California rescues.
That is great news to hear for as big of an undertaking as that situation was, how seamless this seems to be the process. So kudos on the organization with all of that and helping all of those animals. So I want to talk about the mental aspect of animal hoarding because you've seen the show Hoarders. Now, a lot of times it's not necessarily animals with what we see on television. It's with hoarding anything, properties, furniture, things like that. But you see the animal hoarding, and that, in my personal opinion, is the saddest thing because they are in such bad shape sometimes. So I do want to warn our viewers, we're about to show you some footage of a terrible situation that happened in Vista, and it's very upsetting to see, but it is real, and you went in there. So tell us about this situation.
This is a home where there were multiple small dogs that were left, and you can see, there's stuff here too. It's not uncommon for us to encounter stuff and animal hoarding simultaneously because, like you said, it is a mental health, it can be a mental health concern. And oftentimes what ends up happening is the collecting of animals is kind of the way I phrase it. I'm not a psychologist by any means, but the collecting of animals becomes more important for the person or the kind of driving force versus the overall care. And we see that in many of these hoarding situations where the owner believes that they are getting the care that they need, but in reality, they just keep adding to their collection of those animals, and they're not getting the care that they need, which is, Claire, I think from watching this footage, any of the footage from Villa Chardonnay, the having of the animals becomes more important than the actual caring for the animals.
So you have to go in with a warrant just like you would any other situation. Did you do visits first to look at the situation and gather evidence that you needed in order to issue that?
It can depend. I believe this one was eviction, and so we ended up getting called in at the eviction. We do see these cases after evictions. As landlords have been trying to get someone out of there, they think the animals are going to leave with them. They don't realize. You can see in those pictures, like you couldn't even tell how many animals were in that house
so
until
sad.
You start pulling everything out. Some of them, there's not as much stuff and there's just animals everywhere. But after evictions, or sometimes we get like welfare checks that we get a request, and then we'll go and we'll start working with someone. And sometimes we're able to work with them and decrease their numbers slowly and help try and get them to resources. I've worked in many cases where we've been able to do that, but there are situations where the well-being of the animal has to be the most important thing. And in those cases, we have to just step in and remove those animals.
Okay, and as we're continuing to talk, you may see some additional footage of Huskies and Yorkies being rescued. Those situations were same day, but they were two separate cases in San Diego County, and also you may see some footage there in San Ysidro. So very upsetting situations. Let's talk about the lesser known details of situations like this with animal hoarding. What doesn't the public know or understand?
So I think some of the things that are hard to understand, and even for officers when you first start and you start encountering these type of situations, oftentimes, not every time, and I want to be clear on that, but oftentimes there's really no malice. There's no intent. People who end up as hoarders generally do not go into it going, I just want to collect as many animals as possible and not take care of them. Oftentimes there is a trigger that happens in cases that I've worked previously when I was an officer, death of a family member, death of a significant other, and the animals were like that significant other's pride and joy, and all of a sudden they have to get more, and they have to get more as kind of part of a memory. We actually had a case in San Diego where someone's family member, sadly committed suicide, and they had a large reptile collection, and the family member that had all of them just kept getting more reptiles because that's how they were remembering that family member. So there can be a very strong mental health tie, and it is not always based out of malice and intentional harm for these animals. And so
you have some compassion for some of these people.
You have to be able to step back and look at the big picture. And we do try and work with people as much as possible. We try and connect them with services if we can get to connect them with services. Anything we can do to try and support them, but we still have to put the animals' well-being first and foremost.
And it doesn't always end in criminal charges for these people. You try to get them services, as you just
try
said.
and get them services. We let them decrease their numbers slowly as long as the animals are getting the care that they need. And that's the tipping point comes when they can no longer provide the care, but they also can't stop collecting.
Do the people who are doing the hoarding themselves ever reach out to you and say, hey, I'm in this situation, I need help?
Yeah, that does happen
Okay,
sometimes.
okay.
Yep, that does happen
Wow,
sometimes.
okay. And do they ever get to keep their animals or get some of them back? Okay.
Yeah, we'll work with people, especially if they're really trying to get back on the right track. You know, most cities and counties have, you know, animal limits. You can have 7 dogs, three dogs, whatever it may be, 7 cats, and we'll help them like, okay, pick out the 7 you want to keep. You're going to make appointments to bring in, you know, 3 every week until you get to that number, and then we're going to check in on you and see how things are going. We always want to try and be a resource and a help first. We want to be one of the helpers that you're looking for out there. However, we can only do that when we know that the animals are going to be safe in that situation.
Glad you mentioned that, because the compassionate side, we don't always see that, and you're so closely connected to these situations. Okay, we need to move on to the next topic, because we do in California have some of the strictest animal protection laws here in the state, and that's something we should be very proud of. But a lot of agencies will say, hey, there's not enough. So let's talk about what laws are working here and what are not.
Yeah, we have a lot of amazing laws. We have a lot of ability for animal control and humane law enforcement officers across our state to intercede on an animal's behalf, what we call exigent circumstances, to ensure that an animal is getting the care that it needs. We have a lot of zoning. California is very good at their municipal laws for making sure you can have this type of animal on this type of property, which gives us the ability to get onto properties a majority of the times, not every time. And we have a lot of protections in relation to, you know, owners paying fees if we have to be involved and have to take an animal. We have a lot of hearing protections to make sure that due process happens. What we kind of lack is a body that provides general oversight and expertise across the state. We're a huge state, and we have a lot of different animal control agencies, shelters, rescues, and we don't have one entity that really can help collate, organize, and make sure that we're all on the same page across the state.
A centralized bureau. And on that note, you were just in Sacramento talking about this very need. So let's stop now and take a listen.
Time animal law enforcement is called in, the situation has often already reached a crisis point. California's animal cruelty laws are important, but enforcement alone is not enough. As someone who has investigated animal cruelty cases for the last 15 years, I can tell you that our greatest successes are not in our seizures, our warrants, or our prosecutions. Our greatest successes are and will always be when we prevent suffering before it happens.
You could hear how important this is in that message in your voice. So across the aisle, who's listening, do you have bipartisan support on this?
So right now we are at the end of a legislation cycle for the last 2 years. We are expecting, as this wraps up, this legislation cycle wraps up, I think at the end of this week or next week, we do expect to get a lot of interest in this legislation and bureau. That's why we really wanted to start talking about this right now, to be sure that as this 2-year round wraps up, that we have the attention of everyone to really express how important it is, we think it is, to have this bureau created for this oversight.
You would think this would be across the aisle something that would be a win-win and a very positive thing, because no matter which side you're on, most people, you can't speak for everyone, I know a lot of people are afraid of dogs, but most everyone loves some kind of animal, and there's compassion for animals there, so want to see the well-being and to help out an agency like yourself in any way that they can. Yeah. So what is the sentiment across the state of California as far as getting a centralized bureau?
I think it's going to be pretty strong. I think we're going to hear more, like in the coming weeks, we'll get a much better bead on exactly where everyone's standing, but I suspect it's going to be pretty strong. Like you said, this is a pretty, empathetic and compassionate approach to how we can do things better in our state. And I can't imagine that we're going to get a lot of resistance to that. We're a large state. Everybody always has different kinds of ideas. And I think really what it's going to come down to, it'll be less about the animals and it'll be about more control, less control. And I think that's where, we'll see the bigger discussions happening. But I think if we look at this from a very simplistic view, and this bureau isn't created, and they'll be able to create their own rules and all of that. The shelters won't be doing that. Cal Animals won't be doing that. The State Bureau, if it's created, would do that. But if you think about the systems we already have in place in this state, like a 501c3 lookup, we'll use that as an example. As a person who wants to donate money, I can go online to the state and say, hey, I want to donate to this place. Is this a legitimate 501c3? And we can see if they are a legitimate 501c3. Imagine if you wanted to rescue an animal and you could just go somewhere and be like, hey, is this a legitimate rescue, or is this a licensed permitted rescue that's doing the right thing and following the rules of our state?
Right.
And being able to look that, I can't imagine many people are going to want to argue that. It seems like a pretty...
You wouldn't think.
Yeah, a pretty no-nonsense approach
Yeah.
to making sure we are doing things right. And the stories we've been hearing about lately, I think just highlight how important it would be for us to centralize this workload and be sure that as an animal-loving state like we are, that we're doing right in all of the different realms.
It sounds more efficient if that actually goes through, and we wish you luck with that as you
Thank you.
continue this push. I want to go back to the current laws in place and what we're dealing with right now in our forecast.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to extreme heat, or when we hit winter conditions, extreme cold, I don't think the general population knows what the laws are as far as when you can have an animal outside without adequate shade and food and water. What laws are in place to protect animals when it's extreme weather?
So we have a multitude of laws in the state of California, and also some of the municipalities have their own local laws. The general overarching rule, and if you wanted to summarize it in Cliff Notes, is that any animal has to have access to some type of covering, shade, doghouse if it's a dog outside, that prevents them from suffering in whatever the situation is. So like leaving your dog in the car, it's not illegal to leave your dog in the car in the state of California. It's illegal to leave your dog in the car if it is in such a manner that will allow it to suffer due to temperature, weather, unsafe things in that car. So you have to do things in a way that doesn't subject the animal to any type of suffering. So having access to a doghouse, if it's a dog, has to be able to get them out of the heat. It doesn't count if it's baking in the sun and it's 150 degrees inside the doghouse. So it's somewhat common sense. You just have to make sure that the position they're left in doesn't allow them to endanger or suffer. So like tethering's illegal because they could choke themselves, that type of stuff.
And you still see it, unfortunately.
We do still see it.
So getting information out there like we're doing right now hopefully helps and inspires people, especially people with good intentions who don't know and maybe came from a different state, just moved here, and they didn't have the same laws because, again, California has some of the strictest laws in the country to protect animals. Okay, so let's go back really quick. We just have a minute before we have to take our final break here. When it comes to criminal charges for certain cases, why are they so difficult to prosecute?
So some of it's evidence, some of it is just caseload for our criminal courts and justice systems and where priorities lie. Some of it is, the empathy. It can be hard to prosecute for a jury of 12 people to agree to prosecute someone who is maybe older or something like that. There's a host of different reasons. I do want to touch on something you just said. I want to make sure that we all always remember that 99.9% of the people who own animals in our state and in the United States are trying to do the right thing.
Right.
It's really important that, we share that. Sometimes we look at the worst things, but we just want people to try and do best by their pets. That's the biggest thing, and you kind of highlighted that.
Yes, and I'm glad that you circled back around on that because everything can start with good intentions, and we're trying to mitigate that with these laws and the way you're helping.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a final break, and then when we come back, we're going to explain how you can help animals in need. Stay with us. All right, Chief Huggins, final thoughts. If people want to help right now, what are the ways out there that they can help?
There's lots of ways. Come to our website, check out our donations, volunteering, fostering is always huge. We have an unprecedented number of animals in our shelter, unprecedented number of adult dogs. So fostering is a huge one. Talk to your neighbors about what you heard about today. There's a ton of different ways you can help. Okay, and if someone wants to come and walk dogs, is that something they can do and just volunteer at the facility like that? Yeah, absolutely. Come to our website, sign up to be a volunteer, and it'll walk you through all the steps. Oh, so many great ways that everyone can help out there. Thank you so much, Chief. We appreciate you being on our show. I'm Stephanie Simmons. This is The Backstory.